And I think we are live, fellas. Please let me know if you can hear me and if you can see me. Please let me just get set up. Another successful round of tips. I just need to kind of gather myself to comprehend what I just witnessed in that final half of footy for round 15. But that'll be something interesting to talk about, as well as the other 7 games, what we learned, how we did, as always. But first things first, I'll just share this into the tripod group. I'll get my graphics all set up. We'll hear from Tristan to see how the bookies did. And you guys, please let me know what your standout moment of the round was. And please give the video a like if you appreciate all the tripod tips. Give that a friendly share into the group. Cool. Cheers, guys. Appreciate everyone who tunes in. Hope plenty of people have been cleaning up on the mixed matchup tips. We will talk about the Titans last. There were some floggings, that's for sure, Dane. And I want to talk about the beauty of backing teams first half. And Nick, I was also thinking about Melbourne versus Manly and versus Melbourne, and Tigers versus Titans for who was worse. But welcome to the tripod. We break down the NRL every game, every week from a punting perspective. I'm Jacob Wynn. This is the live round 15 recap. I'm trying to gather myself because I've just watched the second half of Manly against the Titans, and I don't know how to explain that one, but we'll have to try and explain that at the end of this pod. But let's get through all 8 games of round 15. First things first, 3 best bets. Obviously, last weekend we swept the board, so we're the bar's pretty high to clear. But you always got to be happy when you go 2-1 on best bets. And we won another mixed matchup. This is starting to get silly. I mean, this is 5 weeks in a row. These aren't $1.90s either. This is the average price is probably around what we got this weekend again, which was $2.75, which was the Rabbitohs to score more points than the Eels. And we got 46 points straight off the bat in the opening game. And then Parramatta only had 6 at halftime today. Now they got on a roll second half. Parramatta finished with 36. So it was a high-scoring mixed matchup, but once again, we get a winner. I mean, if you multiply the odds the last 5 weeks, that's 150 to 1 or something like that to win those 5 in a row. And these, as I said before, these aren't Mickey Mouse limits you can have on the mixed matchup. So I hope that people are cleaning up on those. And we have to shout out TopSport for letting us have a lash at them every week. And we, luckily enough, I have been picking some favorable matchups for us, going on teams when they're doing well and going against teams that potentially underperform. Question, how do you do the mixed matchup? There's always questions about where to find it. It's simply just under rugby league markets. And as Brent pointed out, the one loss we had this week was by just, was the Raiders just going down by a couple of points to the Dragons. But that's the way it goes. Before I go any further, we'll zip through all the rounds and what we take away as we move to a round next weekend with no NRL, of course, looking to Origin. Let's stock take and let's talk about what we learned in round 15. But first, let's hear from the man who lets us have our money on the mixed matchup each week and find out how TopSport did, and that would generally represent how the bookies went in round 15.
Hello, Tripod family. It's Tristan Merlihan here from TopSport. Another winning weekend for the punters with 4 big lines going around and all 4 saluting, with the Rabbitohs, the Panthers, despite the Roosters jumping out to that early lead. The Storm obviously being dominant from the get-go, which is one of the biggest moves. That was one of the biggest moves of the weekend, and by far and away our worst result for the weekend. And then the Eels obviously covering today against the Bulldogs, despite the Bulldogs leading at halftime and looking like they're playing some good football. But I think this demonstrates how those good sides can just get on a roll and they can put a couple of tries together and really blow scorelines out, which seems to have been common throughout the course of the season. The biggest result for us on the weekend was the Dragons against the Raiders. The Raiders were well back. They they went from underdogs into $1.50 favourites, and the Dragons looked in big trouble at half-time, but with the big wind at their back in the second half, they were able to come home over the top and get the result. So, interesting weekend gone. It just demonstrated the big gulf between the top four sides and the rest again, so it'll be interesting what happens once we get through Origin and the big guns go head-to-head. So, all right, punters, hopefully you're back to winner over the weekend, and we'll speak to you during the week.
Now, what Tristan pointed out there, I had the same kind of feeling. I feel like every NRL team now gets a bye next weekend. We've got a standalone Origin Sunday night. So just a heads up, I'll tell you now, Wednesday I'm planning some form of Origin preview. I probably won't make it too long of a pod, but I'll give you something in terms of my breakdown of the match. If I have any tips, if I come up with a unique market, anything like that, normal time you're used to a Wednesday pod, I'll give you something that will be dedicated to Origin 2. I'm trying to potentially get a guest, and we'll just see. I've had one fall through, but we'll see. I'll figure something out with that. But what Tristan noted there, the elites kind of separating themselves. I mean, just quickly look at these scores. I think the Rabbitohs have showed they're the real deal. I'm not saying they're on the level of a Penrith and a Storm, but they go into this week off with a team that has a belief they can go one step further than the last 3 years, where they've made 3 straight preliminary finals and bowed out. Penrith were down 10-0 or 12-0 to the Roosters and then scored 38 straight points. I mean, obviously this Penrith team, when they've got all their troops on deck, they know they can win the comp this year, and that's what they've been on a mission to do ever since they kind of blinked or just turned up half an hour late to the grand final. They're on a mission, and there's absolutely no reason to say why Penrith can't win the comp this year. And then did you see the Storm? I mean, that was just ridiculous what they did to West Tigers on Saturday night, and I'll get to that game. Then today, the Eels were down 10-6 at halftime, as I get that on the screen. Second half, 30-0. Again, I'm not going to completely write them off. I don't think they're on the level of the favourites, but they're a team that goes into this bye week definitely with high ambitions, and you still got like a Reid Marnie and a Sivo and stuff to come back into this team. And then let's not leave out Manly either, the kind of the smoky dark horse, but they're not really a smoky or a dark horse anymore, especially when it's kind of gotten to the point where it's hard to argue that Tom Trbojevic is not the best player in the world. So it's gone from not many people would have ever said he was the best to some people acknowledging he's in the conversation, but he's not healthy enough, to now it's just silly what he does on a footy field. At the highest level of the sport, rugby league, he makes other players look like park footy players around him. So that's 5 powerful teams that go into this break now and are going to kind of formulate a plan to make a surge and give this thing a red hot shake. And obviously, you guys probably agree with me, it's still the Storm and Panthers to beat, but those other 3, on any given night in a finals game, can somebody else pull an upset? You can't write anybody off completely, just especially the way that teams get on a roll and the extra kind of spanner in the works that a send-off or a sin bin can change a game as well. As we know, that's why sometimes we get crazy upsets. But let's go back to where the round began, and it was a good beginning for us because, as I mentioned, the mixed matchup, we took the Rabbitohs to outscore the Eels. So we wanted to see plenty of points from the Rabbitohs, and we pretty much got that. Totally destroyed Brisbane. 46-0 was the final score. I didn't have a best bet on this one, and I was thinking maybe you guys can tell me, because I can't remember off the top of my head what the highest line I've taken for a favourite is this season, because we've had historical number of high line matches, and my instinct as trying to be a sharp punter and trying to find value is you're just never going to get value jumping on the team that everybody expects will win easy. So I've left alone a few of these games. So in a game like Rabbitohs Broncos, where the line was 18.5, I said, I don't see any chance the Broncos have to win this match, but I'm not going to lay like 18.5 on the road. But I think I need to personally reassess. Maybe in these games where I say I don't think one side has any chance, maybe I've got to do what we've never done before and play the massive minus on some of these favourites. Obviously, that was actually one of the easier winners of the week. If you did jump on the Rabbitohs minus the start, they're just about covering by halftime. 18-0 it was halftime, I think, and they went on with it. Massive issues for Brisbane. What I want to say about Brisbane is something that I did kind of warn you guys coming into round 15. I think they had an overinflated opinion of themselves. They thought they're going okay, and the truth is This is a pretty crap football team, to be blunt. And why do I say that? Because they'd won 3. I think they won 3 out of the first 11 or 12, roughly. And that included like an upset win down at the SCG, beating the Roosters on Saturday night. So to them, they're thinking, we only won 2 games last year. We've already won 3. We've beaten the Roosters in Sydney. Like, we're going all right. The truth of the matter is, you beat the Bulldogs at home, back when the Bulldogs couldn't score a point against anybody. You beat the Titans. Every single week, we're seeing how less impressive that win was. If you remember that Broncos comeback win over the Titans, not that dissimilar to what we saw today. And then the Brisbane win over Roosters, I tried to warn people, like, yeah, it was an impressive performance. Don't take too much away from them. But heaps of stuff went right for them. And I think these teams that get an overinflated self-worth are just due for a fall. You know, pride comes before a fall. It's the same with punting. If you think you're going better than you are, you do often get humbled. That's what's happening to the Brisbane now. The reality is setting in, and they play a red-hot team like the Rabbitohs and Latrell backed up from Origin, but Damien Cook was back. Cam Murray was back in this team, and they just carved them up. Moving to Friday night, where the Cowboys played the Sharks, and the Sharkies won 26-24. And this was one of a couple of games this weekend that on paper looked like it was going to be very even and played out that way. And it was anybody's game in the last few minutes. I stayed away from the game. I thought home field might just get the Cowboys over the line, but didn't feel there was value on the Cowboys. So stayed away from the game. Now, if you recall, about 2 weeks ago, I said I'm kicking myself for not sharing out Sharkies $10 to make the 8. 3 weeks later, they're already in the 8, let alone where they'll be by round 25. This Sharkies team clearly has been underrated. We got on them last week. In retrospect, we should have got on them this week as well. A good road victory for them. I think they snapped a 5-game winning streak at home for the Cowboys. And the Sharkies were always out in front in this one. In fact, they led the game 26-12 before the Cowboys made a late surge, couple of late tries, pulled it within 2, had their chance, but ultimately fell short. Disappointing game for the Cowboys. Too many errors was the reason they lost this game. And one other thing is the Sharkies won this game thanks to goal kicking, and it's very rare you can say that about the Sharkies. Think about how many games over the years, especially in recent history, they've lost games where they've actually scored more tries or where goal kicking's failed them. Well, Sean Johnson was 5 of 5 in this game. At least 3 were from the sideline, and they needed every point. And he's a huge difference maker to this team, not just of what his play on the field, but goal kicking as well. So this Sharkies team just keeps surging. Now they're going to be quite happy going into the break. Even a guy like Aaron Woods, who's been told to look elsewhere. And of course, Sean Johnson's, I think, pretty much out the door as well. These guys are some of their best form players. They're not kicking stones. This Sharkies squad seems to have come together, and they know it's a kind of end of an era, and Fitzgibbon's coming in next year, but they're still giving the season everything they've got. Moving to the later game Friday night, which I stayed away from as well, was Panthers beating the Roosters 38-12. And I alluded to the fact that last time these two teams met at this stadium was round 1 of the finals last year. And there was a bit of a similar story. In the finals, I think the Roosters got up 10-0 and then the Panthers scored 28 straight. Well, in this one, the Roosters got up 12-0. Panthers scored 38 straight. Now, of course, all the Origin stars were back for Penrith. Kick out, but pretty much close to a full complement. So you knew that off 2 straight losses, they were going to set things right for Penrith. But you could have questioned, like, would the Roosters at least give them a good game of footy? And based on the fact that the Roosters started hot and there was rain coming down, you suddenly, I mean, if you took the point start with the Roosters, you would have felt pretty confident. One reason I did not have confidence in the Roosters was, of course, Sam Walker was a late scratching, so was Tupanua. So we already know how many guys are on the shelf for this Roosters team. And then to lose 2 key, members of your 13 on top of that, it was always going to be tough sledding. But they got trampled once the Panthers got going, and the Panthers just never took their foot off their throat. Trying to remember now, is it Takiaho, I believe, got sin-binned for a shot on Cleary, and it was a very harsh one. I mean, it was a slippery night, and Cleary slipped down, and there's contact arm to head, but the contact is almost down by Takiaho's waist. That's a sin bin. Panthers scored at least once or twice while the Roosters were down a man. And what I found weird was Cleary just shook it off and didn't even go for HIA. That's how kind of minimal the contact was. So moments like that hurt the Roosters, but I think the result was, is not in question, that the Panthers were far too strong for them. Moving to Saturday, in a season with such high-scoring games, this one was 6-6 with about 5 minutes to go. The Knights got that winning try and won 10-6. And this was a game that was pretty much seen as 50-50. I think when I previewed it on Wednesday, I said probably lean to the Knights there. And at the time, the line was -4.5. And I thought Ponga was back. And then once Ponga got scratched, you take him away, then it looked on paper to be pretty much anybody's game, and it played out that way. I mean, an interesting factor in this Knights Warriors game, which was in Newcastle, and then following game Dragons Raiders at Wollongong, there was gale force winds. So the Warriors had some good field position at 6-6 inside the final 10 minutes, but it was nearly impossible to kick a field goal the direction they were going, whereas the Knights had the wind at their back, and that was a huge edge. And in the end, maybe just that threat that it was easier for the Knights. They had more options of how they could score to get in front. They ended up swinging it wide. I think Brodie Jones gets the winning try for the Knights, whereas the Warriors actually did attempt a field goal and shanked it, which was a killer for them because it was only a few minutes left. And of course, that's the ultimate dice roll. Now, if you go for a field goal that's low probability into a gale force wind, and you give the opportunity to the other team to catch it in goal or it goes dead, now it's a 7-tackle set. And now you're giving the other team a chance to score. And watching this game, I felt like both teams had a good opportunity to win. And whoever lost this one out of Knights and Warriors was going to be pretty gutted because they both laid it all out there. And it was a war. And I actually found it quite entertaining. I know often people criticize low-scoring games as being crap footy, but I actually thought it was a hard-fought game between two teams that were desperate for the competition points. Both have their sights set on getting into that top half of the table, and a much-needed win for the Knights. Mitchell Pearce was back and played well alongside Jake Clifford there. Particularly Clifford's got a good boot on him, and I think that could be a good combination for them. And even though they have to wait another couple of weeks before Ponga is going to join the fray, there's hope now among the Newcastle Knights because they know they're going to get some key players back into the game, and they've just, being able to gut out ugly victories always helps. And that's a valuable 2 points. Whereas for the Warriors, their inexperience, I think as well, ultimately let them down. Moving to the first game of the round where we had a best bet and it lost. And this was the Dragons 22 beating the Raiders 20. And the best bet was Raiders -1.5. Now, the Raiders were up 12-0 in this game. The Raiders were up 20-8 in this game. But I won't say we were unlucky. I think, first of all, I got to acknowledge we've been a bit unlucky over the last few weeks with key players being ruled out of teams that we've had best bets on or we've relied on for the mixed matchups. But in this game, there was a key scratching of Dufty being ruled out for the Dragons. And the way I saw the market move, when I tipped Raiders -1.5, it was 1.5 every bookie. By the next day, every bookie was more like 2 -2.5, whether that was more people jumping on tripod tips after such a good round. I mean, I do believe there is an influence on the market. And then I think the line moved the rest of the way off the back of the Dufty news because then I saw a distinct move of this line from 2.5 to 4.5. So clearly, I think Tristan talked about how the Raiders were backed into $1.50. I mean, part of that was weight of money, but part of that was a key player being out for the Dragons. So they had a youngster on debut. His name escapes me, but playing fullback there, young kid who actually did quite well. And the reason I also won't say we were unlucky is because there was a strong breeze in this game as well, which helped the Raiders build their lead. They were up, I think, 14-6 at halftime. And I could tell when the Dragons came out second half, they actually looked like a confident footy side. They had interviewed Hook and he just said, "You're going to win this game. Just stay confident. And with the wind, we're going to run over the top of them." And I could just see their energy of the Dragons. And when the Dragons did score tries, they were all really amped. And I was really worried. And I felt like when the Raiders were up 4 points with 10, 15 to go, I felt like the game was on a knife edge. I definitely didn't feel like we were in the box seat. You could definitely feel the Dragons were coming. And in the end, the Dragons scored 4 tries to 3. and were too good. And I mean, I stand by my tip. Ultimately, I could see it was an important game for both sides, so I expected a reasonably tight game. But I said on Wednesday, I think the class players of your Jack Whiten and your Josh Hodgson are going to be the difference in this game. And that's the part I got wrong, because the best players on the field were Ben Hunt, Andrew McCulloch, and Corey Norman. So it was actually the key position players of the Dragons who outplayed the Raiders' key position men. That is what got them home. Couple of really clutch, 40-20s, using the wind to their advantage. And ultimately, that Dragons got the win there, and it's a narrow loss for us. But as I said, and I think I've talked about through this year, some of these bets, they're just going to be in the balance with 15 to go, 10 to go. I mean, Jack Whiten scored a try. Maybe that would have been pivotal and won us the game, but it gets called back for an obstruction. And you can argue the toss a little bit. You can argue right at the end, a bit of a harsh call against the Raiders when Valame was pushed into touch. But ultimately, I think Dragons deserve to win that one. And if you are a Dragons fan, I think you've got to be so happy with that win, because it keeps your season alive. This is a Dragons team that started the year red hot, I think 4 or 5 wins, and they're going, look at us, we're in the top 4, And then a few weeks later, they started to skid. It's all right, we're still top 6. And then they skid a bit further. It's all right, we're still top 8. But if they'd lost this one, I really would have predicted a bit of a Dragons tailspin. But to come back, it just keeps their games meaningful, and it keeps the troops confident. So it's a much-needed victory for the Dragons going into their little break that they'll get now as well. You know who else needs a break? The West Tigers. Oh, my God. I don't know how many people caught this one. I was like getting quite tired Saturday night, and I was actually thinking, geez, I pretty much know how this one's going to go. Like, Tigers have no chance, especially once I saw the Storm score early. And I thought about just going to bed early, record the game, and catch it Sunday morning. But the Storm were actually tearing them to shreds so violently that I was actually compelled to keep watching it, because I was just thinking, this is insane. This is gonna push the history books what the Storm are doing. It was pretty evident early on that the Storm had stepped out onto the footy field to put on a bit of a show, just the way they were keeping the ball alive. They were swinging it from side to side. But they scored some of their tries so soft. And I put up a post on the Tripod page about how the Storm had 10 different try scorers, and yet neither Adokar or Jennings or Olam scored. So when has that ever happened, that a team could score 66 points? You have prolific try scorers, especially the Fox, on the wings, but the Tigers were so soft that the ball never even got to the wingers or even to Olam at centre in that case, because the holes were so gaping that the inside men were all cleaning up. This game was 60-0 to the Storm after about 60 minutes before the Tigers got a couple of consolation tries late. Storm had a man sent to the bin. You can say the Tigers saved a tiny bit of face, just because if they didn't do that, who knows, they could have dead set lost 80-0. But that's horrendous for the Tigers. And I made the point about Brisbane. I want to kind of echo that point with West here, that I think they were a bit self-inflated of how good they were coming in. You go back a month ago, the Tigers stacked up a couple of wins on the trot. They beat a Dragons team that had quite a few key players out, and they beat a Penrith team that had a heap of players out. And if they thought that meant they're on the right track and they're playing good footy, they got a rude awakening when last week the Eels put 40 on them, and this week the Storm put 66 on them. One other thing, and again, I don't want to talk as if it's in hindsight. This was something that I feel like I picked up this weekend. I think there was something noticeable about the teams that have not had the bye yet. So let me see if I can remember off the top of my head. I mean, Brisbane has not had the bye yet. They look like a tired footy team to me. Particularly the Tigers. I can't remember if the Roosters also is a team that's kind of longing for a bye week. The Tigers haven't had a bye yet. Now you can say, well, the Storm haven't had a bye yet. It didn't stop them. The Penrith hasn't had a bye yet. But these teams have had a lot of key players in and out. They've had the luxury of resting guys. So I feel like they've been able to keep building. They've been able to stay fresh because they've been able to use their depth. They're not burning out all their best players. Whereas I think some of these teams that are not going along too well, and in particular, Tigers and Broncos kind of spring to mind. They're just desperate to have a week off and rest up, because they've just been copping too many hidings in a row, and they're just low on energy. I mean, if you saw this Storm Tigers game, you would have thought it was some of the worst defense you've ever seen in your life, only to be rivaled by the Titans 24 hours later. But it was embarrassing. And for our Tigers over 7.5 wins bet, I never thought that they had a chance to win this game, but it was one of those losses that almost looked so damaging. It had me worried. Can they pick themselves up in 2 weeks to play footy again? Because we need them to be able to obviously win at least 3 more from their last 9 games to get us over the line, to give us a shot at that 15-1. Today we had a best bet in each of the games, and the biggest point I need to make about these games, because I liked the Bulldogs against the Eels and they lost by 26. And I liked the Titans against the Seagulls and they lost by 32. And we won both our best bets and we won the mixed matchup. So that is where I'm not going to claim I was right. I was on the wrong side in 2 games, but there is a technique, or there is something to be said for picking the best possible market on a side you like to give yourself the best chance. And I spoke about on Wednesday how I like taking an underdog in the first half to cover basically half of the full-time line, because I think it's much more likely if they are going to get blown out. And just because I like an underdog doesn't guarantee they won't be blown out. It means I think they got a decent chance of putting up a fight, but no pick is 100%. So you still want to try and execute that play to get the best likelihood you can. And I've spoken about taking these underdogs first half and only having to sweat for 40 minutes. And if it blows out late, it's all right. Your bet's already decided. We did that with both of these games. So let's talk about Bulldogs Eels, where the Bulldogs actually led the Eels 10-6 at halftime. Again, there was a bit of rain. If you were on, let's say, the Eels minus 20.5, you would have had no confidence that they were going to roll second half. But they absolutely did that. The Bulldogs had the second half from hell. The Bulldogs barely had the footy. The Bulldogs dropped the ball. Mitchell Moses kicked ahead, got tackled. It was a penalty try. And then the very next Eels set, they scored from 60 metres through Sean Lane. Then the Bulldogs had a man sent to the bin. It was bang, bang, bang in the end. 30-0 second half to the Eels. And they cover the full 20.5 point line. But lucky for us, we had plus 10.5 in the first half. So we barely even had to sweat. So that was a game of 2 halves if I've ever seen one. You've gone from, geez, the Bulldogs are showing a ton of fight here and giving the Eels plenty to handle, to basically once the game hit that tipping point where the Bulldogs realised they couldn't go with Parramatta anymore, they got, blown off the park. And that's kind of what happened in the final game of the round as we moved to the Titans Seagulls. So the Seagulls won 56-24. Our best bet was Titans plus 4.5 in the first half. If you're wondering, that won. The Titans were up 24-8 at halftime. So again, taking that underdog first half pays off handsomely. At this point in time, let me not forget, I owe a shout out to another punting pod or punting show. I won't call them a rival because I don't think any punting shows have to be rivals. I think if you like kind of punting content, the more the merrier. And there's lots of people out there that put together great content. I enjoy like some of the stuff that YKCR puts out. Shout out to Scope. I've had him on the Wild World of Punting. And the Hello Sport Boys have a new punting show called About Even. And I talked about that. You may have seen me do an Instagram story today, but maybe majority of people haven't. So to give you a background, so these guys preview a few of the NRL games every week. They've got quite a different style to the tripod, but they give you, some exotic same game multis. They certainly shoot for the longer odds, and they're still doing okay with their staking. Check it out if you're interested in that. I find it entertaining to watch. And they were all over Manly, and they're saying Manly are morals. Manly's going to win 13 plus. And here I am thinking, I think the Titans are plotting a little ambush this weekend. I like the Titans' chances. So I got in touch with those guys and said, let's have a pod versus pod side bet for a carton, and I'll take the Titans plus 7.5. You guys can take Manly minus 7.5 since you're certain that it's going to win. And they took me on. And the first half, I was feeling pretty good about myself. And then that second half, let me know what you guys think happened. I'm only half joking. My honest guess is that someone put sedatives in the Titans water bottles at halftime, because they lost the second half 48-0 after being up 24-8 in what a game I described as a kitchen sink game, considering the Titans only have 5 wins this season, definitely have top 8 aspirations, I will say all their origin players playing, but AJ Brimson was out, but that's no excuse because Jaden Campbell was carving up at fullback, so they weren't missing Brimson. For them to come out, and the only reason they didn't lose the half 50-0 or more is because Garrick missed about 3 straight conversions to start the half. So that is I just watched West Tigers play on Saturday night, and they were losing the game at one stage 60-0. I will go as far to say that Titans second half was even worse than anything I saw last night with the Tigers. I really was starting to question, how does Holbrook even keep his job? Like that's just, and you're at home, and you have to give a lot of credit to Manly and Matty O'Keefe, who's a proud Manly fan who's got his grand final tickets booked, is saying, of course, just Turbo happened, and it is true. I mean, but Turbo had back-to-back tries in the first half that actually put the Seagulls in front, but then the Titans finished the half with 18 straight points. That second half, I mean, everyone had a whale of a game. Ruben Garrick had 4 tries, I think. Dylan Walker looked really good. I mean, everyone looked good. They were playing against, I call the Titans an under-20s team, but I mean, what I saw from them today, it's like schoolboy level, if that. So that was absolutely shocking. I was in shock. So I have to, once again, shout out to the About Even guys because they won that emphatically against me, and now I owe them a carton. And check their show out if you're interested, because you would have probably been steered into a winner in that one. But luckily, all I can say is, even though I was on the wrong side of both the footy games today, I still did steer us into a best bet winner in each of them. And I'm not, I'm going to celebrate every best bet winner and not apologize about that, because there's going to be ones where I feel I got the game right and we don't get a bounce, or, strange things happen and we lose. So that's definitely going to happen through a year. So if we're on the wrong side, but the bet we make wins, let's cop it. Let's enjoy it. Because we're on a hell of a run right now, guys. As I said, thank you for being a part of it. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for supporting, because that's what makes it all worthwhile. And, just because we're going so well, I don't try any less hard. I still, I work just as hard every single week, even if the results are going to vary a bit. That's footy and that's punting. But the hard work is always there to try and find the best bets, the best value that I can to share with you guys. And I appreciate everyone who follows along. It really is not easy to win money long-term on the punt. It is easy to lose. So as always, gamble responsibly and Lego.